Welcome back to the Victorian Barroom. I wanted to spend some time talking with everybody about why it actually is I do this. What led me to do the Victorian Barroom in the first place? Do I like history and drinking? Yes. I love putting those two things together. But what actually led to this was farming. That's actually the whole point. That's what we're trying to do. And before anybody says anything in the comments, yes, these are denim pants. No, they are not modern blue jeans. These are made as they were around the 1880s. I think they're very great for work and hanging around the house, which we're doing today, talking with you guys. So yes, it's actually all about farming. And so I'll tell you a little bit about how that worked around to this. For most of my life, well back into my teenage years, all I ever really wanted to be was a Victorian farmer with a special interest in apple orchards. So a lot of things, led me to be almost 40 and not having quite made that happen yet. There's problems with money. It's something very out of the ordinary. People don't tend to be encouraging when you tell them that this is the kind of thing you want to do. And so I would say fear is a big thing that kind of stood in my way of making the leap to make that happen. So anybody out there who's got an unusual idea that they really want to do with their life, take a moment and think, is it really fear that's mostly standing in your way? Because when I look at my life, that's been a lot of what it was. So this has been a dream for a long time. I was involved with historic Locust Grove in Louisville, Kentucky for a very long time. I still am involved there. I started as a volunteer in 1999. My first staff position was in 2011, and by 2016 I was the program director. And Locust Grove was a farm, starting around 1795 and going up until the 1960s. But as program director, I was lucky enough to be part of the team that researched and got started their small farm distillery exhibit and project. There was a distillery at Locust Grove starting around 1808, and so we set to figuring out what it might have been like. The records about it, the documentation was very scarce because this was started in 1808. There really wasn't a whole lot to talk about. There weren't national taxes on it. It was just part of the small farm economy. So I found myself on the team trying to figure this out, what this distillery was like, what they made, how they made it, and all of this. And it was a great experience. I even got to go to Mount Vernon. They have a fully functional recreated distillery. They actually make some wonderful late 18th century style spirits there, and I got introduced to the art of distilling by their master distiller, Steve Bayshore, and he's a really wonderful fellow. So I got to go out there and really start the journey to figuring out what this was, and then bring that back to Locust Grove and start building this thing. So this experience took distilling in my mind as being, this wonderful luxury that kind of stands alone that I could go to the store and get the product of and have a good time drinking, to being a central part of the farm economy and to the agricultural economy as a whole, especially in the region where I live in northern Kentucky. I got to look at that very closely. Through this process, then, I also got to meet Alan Bishop, who has become one of my best of friends ever since then. He is the master distiller at Spirits of French Lick, and his passion was and is really bringing back the apple brandy culture that used to exist in this region. And so for anybody out there who doesn't know, obviously, here in Kentucky, we're very much known for bourbon. Bourbon was able to come back after Prohibition when it was repealed in 1933. Getting a grain crop up and running off the ground is, I'm not going to say easy enough, that's selling it short, but it's possible. What a lot of people don't realize is that brandy was a very big part of the spirit culture around here prior to Prohibition as well. And this goes all the way back into the 18th century. So throughout the whole 19th century, throughout the whole Victorian period, apple brandy was a big thing that happened in this region. But during Prohibition, those 13 years that irreparably changed the landscape of our agriculture and our spirits, if they caught you making brandy, they would not only bust your still, like if you had been making whiskey, but they cut down your whole orchard too. So we lost a lot as far as, heritage varieties of apples and the ability to make this happen. But I had already started and fascinated with this idea, and then I met Alan, and he had it underway. He actually was making a concerted effort to recreate the apple brandy that was produced in southern Indiana and by extension also northern Kentucky in the 19th century, all the way up to Prohibition. So you've seen his stuff featured on this show before. The Old Clifty Hoosier Apple Brandy is the truest expression of that style that you can get around here, and so that experience got me thinking about orchards again and about the idea of trying to resurrect and keep alive these old varieties so I could, in my way, wanting to be just a farmer, not necessarily a distiller in a large distillery, but as a Victorian farmer, I could then contribute, hopefully, to this revival of the apple brandy that used to be so prolific in this area where I've lived my whole life. And a lot of people who live here just don't realize that was part of it. And so then 2020 came along, and there was this thing that happened. This germ got all around and, gave us all a lot of time to think. And so I got to thinking about a lot of things that I'd left undone and where things were in my life. And farming was number one. This was always my pinnacle goal. But I asked myself, what have I actually done to get closer to it? And my answer was nothing. And so I started thinking about how that could happen. And I started looking at how do you be an orchardist? How can you become an orchardist? And the only answer I could find was to work with an orchardist. And so I was like, okay, well, I got to do that. And so the first person I found actually was a wonderful lady named Helen. She has an orchard not far from where I live. She specializes in heritage apples, and so I sent her an email one day and I asked her, could I just come and work for you? Could I work with you for knowledge and experience so I can learn how to do this? And she said, yes, I could. And it turned out she actually already knew who I was because she had come to some of the programs that I ran at Locust Grove and really enjoyed them. And so that was the middle of 2020. I've been working with her ever since whenever I can, at least once a week when the schedule pans out. And so yeah, I actually more than a year and a half in at this point, and I've gotten to dig in and get my hands dirty learning about these heritage apples, how to plant them and take care of them and grow them. And that's where I am now, trying to just kind of push forward with this propagation of heritage apple varieties and things of that nature, and to help do my part to bring this back. So how does this play into the Victorian barroom? Well, here's the deal. It dawned on me that I'm only ever going to be a very small producer, if I'm working with actual 19th century methods. And I have seen repeatedly in my life very hardworking, very capable people go out and attempt small organic farming and fail through no lack of effort, through no lack of knowledge, through no lack of just good, hard work. And so I knew I couldn't just grow apples to sell apples for people to eat, because I'm not going to compete with the major grocery store chains and things of that nature and whatever industrial mess they've got going out there where these big tasteless apples come from that we buy so many of. But it occurred to me that people are a lot more willing to pay more for a luxury than their sustenance. And that kind of reinforced my idea that brandy was the thing to focus on. And so it's like, well, I need to forge a cornerstone of a way to talk to people, of a way to get this word out. And that's where the Victorian barroom came from. It's like, I'm not necessarily growing my own apples yet. They're not being produced into apple brandy, but by God, I can tell people what to do with it. And so here at home, Amy and me had been experimenting with Victorian cocktails. We had made that discovery. I've talked a lot about that on the show. And since the small farm distillery was starting at Locust Grove, we were doing more alcohol-based programming there. And so I got to take the research that I was doing at home with my own materials, my own sources and spirits and things like that. And I started being able to take that to work. And so it just kind of blossomed. And it's like, well, let's talk to people about it. Let's bring them along on this journey with us. So I don't consider myself to be an expert in Victorian mixology. I'm very interested. I see myself as taking you along on this journey with me, and hopefully we can kind of all get there together. And maybe one day I'll be growing apples that I'll send down to Allen to turn into some great brandy. So that's my goal also. Cider is the other side of this. Apple cider was such a big part of brewing culture in England and France and the United States. And my buddy Adin and me, we were going to do a show about this. This was going to be the cornerstone of the show. We went out to the orchard early in 2021 when things were just starting to bloom. And we had a great conversation out there about cider. But a subdivision has grown up around the orchard, and like everybody decided to do home improvement that weekend, and there was a military convoy flew over or something, and so the audio was completely unusable. So we're gonna try that again in another format to get Adin out here with us and talk cider for a whole episode. But Adin and Alan, we call ourselves the Unholy Apple Alliance. They did get out to the orchard to pick some apples and to take them back to work their magic with, and so it has been long enough since then that Adin gave me a bottle of cider that he made mostly from the Spitzenbergs that grow there at the orchard. It's a wonderful old variety. Thomas Jefferson grew them himself. He balanced out the Spitzenbergs with, I think, some apples that he had picked up in Michigan. So he's a great blender of that kind of thing. So even though he couldn't be here with us, when we're talking about this the first time, I did want to give a shout out to Adin out there and the wonderful work he's doing, and we can't have a barroom show without tasting something, and I haven't tasted this yet, so let's see how those apples we picked at the orchard last year turned out. I'm going to put it in a goblet here so you can just see that beautiful golden color. And Adin doesn't use juice. He has a press from the 1890s that he's fixed up, and this is all 100% heritage apples, so it's nice and fizzy. It's a wonderful apple aroma. Yeah, on the nose. It's not really sweet. It's just got a nice bit of tartness there, which I really like. Yeah, you've probably picked up on the show, even though the Victorians had a sweet tooth, I'm not always like an overly sweet drink guy. A nice dry tart, not hitting you over the head with it at all, but just really magical. For me, it's neat to see the result of agriculture that I helped with now having come full circle into a wonderful cider that one of my best friends made, just like would have happened in the 19th century. Okay, this, especially in the early part, up until the railroads got going and all that, this was a very local, very personal thing that happened. So, thanks, Adin, for this wonderful gift of this cider from the apples that we all picked together. I'm looking forward to future experiments with all these guys. You're going to meet Alan on the show at some point. We just haven't gotten together yet, but please think about clicking that like and subscribe button. If you want to keep up with what we're doing, click the bell icon too. You'll get a notification. It really does help us out if you do that. But this has just been a little unusual episode, but I wanted to give you a peek at the story, what actually led to this. And whenever you're trying to do something out of the ordinary, it just helps to tell people about it so you can make those connections and talk to people. So, at least 9 people out of 10 is really aren't going to have anything productive to say, quite honestly. And a lot of them might be even discouraging. But it's that one person that you do run into that shares that niche interest, that probably has some insights that you don't have, and then you're going to have some that they don't have, and you wind up helping each other out. So thanks for being with us. Thanks for hanging in for the conversation. If anybody wants to talk about historic farming in its relation to brewing and distilling, put it down in the comments below. Reach out to me, and we're going to be back very soon with some more mixology. And one of these days, Adin's going to come out, and we're going to repeat that conversation. He's going to tell us more about this. So here's to you, and see you next time.